Good morning. On behalf of SEPS, ECRI, welcome to this webinar where we will launch the report of a SEPS ECRI task force on money laundering in the EU. Time to get serious. We're happy to welcome you and to have this debate on the report, which is the result of a SEPS task force, which started almost exactly a year ago, the last week of January 2020, before the COVID crisis started. We met with a very large, diverse group of interested parties, not only the financial sector, but also non-financial sector, consultants, academics, relevant institutions. We met about 5 times over a 1-year period. And now we are formally presenting the report in presence of the chair, Eero Heinäluoma, who's a member of the European Parliament and a former Minister of Finance of Finland, also a chair of the Parliament of Finland. We have Raluca Bruna, who's head of unit dealing with these matters within DG FISMA in the European Commission, but Raluca was also before that in DG Just, and also before that a Minister of Interior in Romania, so also well familiar with this issue. And Burkhard Mull, who's a head of department in Europol, the entity which is coordinating the financial intelligence units, which are crucial entities in the process of discovering money laundering. I will explain this in a moment. So welcome all of you. The task report is published just now. It's available on our website. You can download it from our website, and we'll try to explain in this 1 hour with what are our recommendations, for which I will give Eero the floor. And then also we'll have the comments from Raluca and Burkhard on our report, but then we'll also have about half an hour for questions and answers, for which you have the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, let's say, where you can raise questions, but there's also a chat box where you can, if you have specific comments you want to raise. So again, welcome, and I hope we will have an interesting debate, and it's really a pleasure that we can launch this report today with you and discuss our findings on what is, I think, a very important issue, which we all know. Let's say we all read a lot about this, but sometimes policy-wise, it's not an easy issue to deal with and to come up with solutions. How can we improve money laundering in Europe? Eero, I pass you the floor. I said that we're very happy that we could work with you, and it was a privilege and an honor that you could be a chairman of a task force. A Minister of Finance, a former Minister of Finance, is of course well aware of these issues, but also you now as a member of the European Parliament are also focusing on these matters, and I hope, let's say, that when the Commission makes its proposals a bit later this year, you can be very helpful and also instrumental in guiding this through the European Parliament, and hope, let's say, we can continue to work with you. Eero, I pass you the floor to give you, to also share with us your views on the subject, and then I will probably also discuss a bit briefly the recommendations. Eero. You're muted, Eero. You're on mute, Eero, yes. Still on mute.
So yes. What about everything is working? So this is the most common question during recent years. Do you hear me? And, hope that a lot of positive answers. Warmly welcome also from my side, and thank you, Richard. This is an important moment, and really eager to present our findings after very intensive 1-year work. Special thanks to you and Richard and also, and I have to say that this has been something which has been worth of doing, this 1-year activities, and it's a proud moment to present the findings today. Something about the history before going to the recommendations. EU tries to tackle money laundering already since 1989 with a first initiative. Now, 30 years later, and despite 5 directives and numerous initiatives, the figures around money laundering are still skyrocketing. Indeed, the amount of proceeds of crime recovered as a result of successful money laundering prosecutions as compared to the amount thought to be actually laundered is around 1% at best, a shocking figure. Against this background, it's an honor to present today briefly the main findings of our task force, which is about 2 or 3 months before the Commission is due to publish its proposal. When I accepted to lead this task force, I was eager to do it because already during my years as a Minister of Finance, I had acknowledged the sincere problems and of the money laundering and their negative effect on our societies. And I had a very strong feeling that now there is a possibility to make change, that the public is waiting it, the voters are waiting it, and one of the important things is also that the financial sector, business life is now speaking in favor of reforms. I hope that this Commission proposal will be a turning point in the fight against money laundering. At the same time, of course, there is realism needed, as this study very clearly outlines. Changes on different levels are urgently needed, changes which most likely go beyond the remit of the new regulation. Obviously, money laundering is always the result of an underlying crime, which should be strongly tackled. Only 3 weeks ago, the Belgian Customs Authority declared 2020 was so-called Grand Cru year for the import of cocaine in the port of Antwerpen. Only 10 to 20% was seized, which represents around 65 tons, with a street value of 75 billion euro. This means at least 80% will come on the market for this rate, a street value of around 300 billion euro. Money that will in the normal economy in the coming years. And this example demonstrates that tackling better underlying crime generating the proceeds is an absolute priority, without which tackling money laundering more effectively will remain an uphill battle. One of the main strengths of the task force is in no doubt its composition of high-level participants from public and private sector, ready to listen to each other's viewpoints. Clearly, we can only tackle money laundering better if we cooperate more effectively, different public levels, but also with private sector. And better cooperation will serve us all. To see the budget which is invested yearly by the EU financial institution for AML compliance is also a little bit shocking. The true cost of financial crime compliance global report released in April 2020 by LexisNexis estimated that the annual cost of financial crime compliance worldwide is around $181 billion, in Europe being $137 billion. Looking at the amount of criminal proceeds which are actually seized in the end, this is pretty unbalanced. This multidisciplinary group stressed that an absolute priority is a better implementation of the legislation. At the same time, we need clear legal text. Time of directives is over. We have to have a bigger step forward to avoid national regulatory fragmentation, which has led to inefficiencies and rising compliance costs. So regulatory harmonization is therefore vital, and this is one of the big things we are waiting now to happen. At the same time, there is a clear supervisory challenge. AML supervision requires the cooperation of a multitude of supervisory entities, financial and non-financial supervisors, FIUs and law enforcement officials. In the EU context, this means well in excess of 100 entities. Clearly, European Banking Authority has been given some powers to intervene in AML field. And one of the proposals, in a way, step-by-step approach, is to strengthen the role of EBA. Then in the European Parliament, there is a very strong support to set up EU Supervisory Agency, and this, of course, could be an important step forward. But again, this is not a silver bullet. The supervision authority is needed, but it will not resolve all the problems. Only when the mandate of the authority is clearly outlined, the legal tools are granted, and all actors cooperate better together, we will make progress. And the real bottleneck in AML effectiveness lies with the FIUs, financial intelligence units. The FIUs are organized, resourced, and staffed very differently across the member states. Even their legal bases differ substantially, and their performance leaves much to be desired. According to the figures from Europol, out of the 1.1 million suspicious activity reports across the European Union in 2000, only 10% have been further investigated by public authorities, only 10%. And only 1.1% of criminal profits are eventually confiscated at the European Union level. Against this background, a much better cooperation of all the financial intelligence units is needed, and this could be one key step forward also. At the same time, progress will not only be made by changes in the institutional architecture. Indeed, practical steps are urgently needed as well. The member states should establish a uniform template for suspicious transaction reports, for example, to be integrated in the centralized platform FIU.net. Then a better cooperation between public and private sector should be elaborated. We are also making some proposals here. Data need to be better shared. This is one of the cornerstones in the reform. This ought to be happen between enforcement bodies involved, including the judiciary, including across national borders. And this relates not just to types of data, but amounts of the speed of data sharing. For example, the financial institutions ought to know what is happening to their information and their reports. Now they don't have the feedback. And of course, we ought to use more technology, and this could be very useful, and also from the cost point of view, an important thing to do. Rules and supervision are key. However, without effective enforcement, the progress risks to be limited. In this respect, more clarity and streamlining is needed around the underlying AML-related crimes. So, to conclude, these measures need to be effective and proportionate. That's one of the conclusions of our work. And we'll only be successful if we work together cross-border. In this respect, I believe that the recommendations in this report are balanced, and as they approach the problem from different angles, they could make an important contribution to the debate on how to improve the fight against money laundering. I look forward to the comments from the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eero. Thank you for sharing with us, I think, almost all the recommendations of our report. Probably my colleague Beatrice could quickly bring up, let's say, one slide where we have put these recommendations together. You can find it also on the SEPS and on the ECRI website. If I could add probably two things to what Eero said. First of all, we also said that the supervision of non-financial institutions is also extremely important. But one of the problems which we have there is this is not coordinated or hardly coordinated at European level. We know that half of the money laundering is happening not through financial institutions, but through non-financial institutions. But the supervision of that sector, even at the national level, hardly exists. And this encompasses many different entities. Eero just referred to, for example, drugs and drug dealers, but there are also the traditional things like the casinos, the law firms, the auditors, the notaries, gaming, etc. There's so many different entities where we need to try to think about a better European-wide supervision. Another issue in this context is we need to have better identification tools. We have the ultimate beneficial owners registers, which are followed up in different ways in different member states. And then we have also the legal entity identifier, which is a system which exists since the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, proposed by the FSB, but which has also not been followed up a lot. So if you have then the financial supervisors and non-financial supervisors, basically they supervise financial and non-financial institutions. I said much less on the non-financial supervisory side, but both of them, financial institutions, non-financial institutions, are supposed within the context of the AML directives to pass on suspicious transaction reports, STRs, the financial intelligence units. A second very important thing, as Eero said, I think the real bottleneck is FIUs and the cooperation amongst FIUs, on which Burkhard will say something in a moment. But I think the strengthening of resources, capabilities, staffing of FIUs is very important to really tackle money laundering. The cooperation amongst them, let's say, on which I think Raluca can say something in a moment, is very important and is a bit because of a strange problem in the void. And I think also the data exchange amongst them is a very important problem. That's it in a nutshell, but you have this structure for you here. You can find that, let's say, how this processing of information works. And of course, if you imagine that this has to work on a national level, but also on a European level, and also eventually on an international level, you can imagine how complex this is. I pass the floor to Raluca. I'm very happy that she can join us and give us her comments on the report, but also share a bit of information what the Commission is planning to do. Raluca.
Thank you, Carol. Good morning, everyone. Let me start by saying that it's an honor for me to have been part of this task force and to have witnessed the report in the making. And before that, the discussions that we had, the very vivid and good discussions that we had in the task force, in the SAPS-AML task force. And now the report is out for everyone to see what is the result of our thinking in the task force. I think that this report comes timely because as our informed audience know, it is the case that now we are witnessing an exceptional, I would say, political momentum in which, as MEP Heinäluoma said, their calls and from the institutional actors and from the stakeholders to act, to do something. So based on this, if you allow me, before saying a couple of words about the report, I mean, I would not repeat what MEP Heinäluoma and yourself, Carol, said. I would like to just briefly present where is the Commission work at this stage. You know that based on, as I said, the very firm, clear political mandate in 2 rounds of Council conclusions in December 2019 and in November 2020, but also based on a resolution by the Parliament, the last of which was in July last year. The Commission started to, first of all, it adopted an action plan in May last year. The action plan followed to the previous work of the Commission and put together a number of actions, of pillars where action is urgently needed in order to address a problem, because yes, we do have a problem. I would not go through all the pillars of the action plan. I would just say that now, after an extensive public consultation that was launched last year the very same day when the action plan was adopted. It lasted until end of August, and it was also concluded with a high-level conference in which both MEP Heino-Loma and yourself, Carol, attended. It was chaired by our EVP, Dombrovski. We have reached, after the public consultation, I may say, agreement on the big lines of, and not only of the reform to come. And now we are working on an AML package. The intention of the Commission is to table this package in the first half of 2021. And obviously, it will the package will address three main issues. First of all, as it was said before, despite an extensive legal framework, a series of directives in the last 30 years, it is still the case that we do have a fragmentation at the level of member states in the very transposition and application of the rules. And this is why we are proposing more harmonization in the field, to take a look at the rule book and to see to which extent some of the rules need to be moved, if I'm allowed to say so, into a first AML regulation. So this is the first strand of work, and I'm happy to see that the SEPS report also goes in its conclusions into this direction. A second stream of work is obviously supervision. Here, as you know, conclusions of the public consultations, but also, again, the audience today is an informed audience, and they know, it was also said before, that money laundering is not only happening through financial institutions, but also through non-financial institutions. And this is why there is agreement that the future layer of EU supervision should cover, just to reply to the problem and to the expectations, should cover both the financial and the non-financial sector. This does not mean, however, that the future action of the EU supervisor will be the same in the financial and the non-financial sector. I will not enter into the details, but I would be happy to reply to questions thereafter. I want to say about supervision just that it is not intended that this additional layer of EU or supervision at EU level is replacing national supervision, not at all. The intention is to work with the competent authorities, supervisory authorities in the member states, and to help them address, as I said, a problem. The idea is to bring together all the efforts of this supervisor. The third stream of work that you will see reflected in the forthcoming legislative proposals is obviously on the financial intelligence units. Here, you know that the Commission published in 2019 a report on how the FIUs are functioning. And here as well, based on consultations that we had, including with FIUs, because they're our main interlocutors, we came up to the conclusion that what was proposed in the action plan, a mechanism for support and coordination, is the right way to address the issue. Here again, we have to be mindful. We are mindful in the Commission of the specificity of FIUs. They are autonomous and independent bodies. This is a requirement from international standards of the Financial Action Task Force. They're established differently in different member states. Some of them are established as law enforcement. Some of them are administrative bodies. In a couple of member states, the FIU is established within part of the prosecution. This is not to be challenged. This is, it's still speaking about the proportionality. It's still for member states to decide where to place their FIUs. And we think that the scope of EU action in this field has to address cooperation between FIUs and the STR's issues. So as we speak, there are different ways in different member states. You have mentioned, Carol, common templates. This is something that we're looking at, because as trivial as it may seem, having common templates might indeed facilitate the cooperation. So in a nutshell, this is where we stand with the work on the legislative package. Just a word, because I said that the report, I'm pleased to see, and I speak on behalf of the entire team in the Commission, in DG FISMA, working on this very complex file. We're very pleased to see that conclusions in this report, they largely concur with the thinking that we have been doing. Just a couple of words, if you allow me, on where to place. We have to establish a EU supervisory body, and we have to establish a mechanism for cooperation for FIUs. It is the intention is to come up with a proposal that responds to in a holistic way. And not to create fragmentation, in the sense that, we would have FIU, the cooperation and the support and coordination mechanism in one place at union level, and the supervisory at union level in another place. But the idea would be to have one AML authority. This is still something under vivid discussions. But when it comes to supervision, because the report features indeed the important role that the European Banking Authority has, we don't challenge this. DG FISMA and the Commission made a proposal in 2019 to enhance, among other things, the AML competencies of the European Banking Authority. But as we are of the view that the non-financial sector should not be left outside, we should use a good political momentum to also address this. While we'll take a step-by-step approach, in the sense that in a first stage, the supervisory authority in the Union would not exert the same level of supervision for financial institutions, not even within the financial sector, to all financial institutions, let alone the non-financial. But we are of the view that, first of all, we have to determine the scope, the competencies of the supervisor, and then it will naturally come where exactly to place this structure. I would stop here, and I would like to thank and our chairperson, MEP Heina Loma, for chairing the task force, and the two co-rapporteurs, Carol and Richard, for the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Raluca. Very interesting and very quick that you managed to put us all into a few minutes, let's say, to explain where you are. Let's say thank you very much also for the compliments. Burkhard, we're very happy that you can join us, because, as I said, the role of Europol and the FIUs is sometimes not sufficiently known. Please share us your views on this issue, this very difficult, as Raluca said, policy issue.
Thank you, Karel, for giving me the chair. It's a pleasure for me being with you today, and let me first mention that we would like to thank you, distinguished Member of Parliament, Mr. Heino Roma, and the entire task force for this quite impressive work, and also for including Europol in this important project. As already mentioned also by Ms. Brunner, the report comes timely in view of the upcoming announced changes to the EU AML framework. Europol is active in combating money laundering since its inception, basically. We started off in the 90s dealing with money laundering only related to drugs offenses, and that was step by step extended to all crimes. So we have operational cooperation with all the member states and third countries we cooperate with, and they submit cases, money laundering investigations to us. We have some of the best analysts and financial investigators here at Europol to analyze the intelligence that is submitted to us. We provide operational analysis reports, also strategic analysis reports on the phenomenon. And we also go out in the field and support investigations on the spot. We send mobile offices, supporting house searches, arrest warrants, seizures, and so on. And we also do very closely cooperate with financial intelligence units they, to a varying degree, I have to emphasize, send information also to Europol. I would briefly like to mention why we believe that fighting money laundering is very important. In my point of view, we lose sometimes a little bit the ultimate goal why we want to fight money laundering. First, of course, we want to prevent the financial sector and also the other sectors involved from being infiltrated by crime proceeds. That will lead to the distortion of economic markets, to unfair competition, and also corruption will be fueled by the money that is coming from criminal offenses. And also the enforcement is, of course, very important to ensure also to the public to keep up the trust in the rule of law, that the governments are doing something about this very, very important crime phenomenon. And we are acting on various levels, not only operationally, we contribute also at strategic level. And I would like to point out that we currently very closely cooperate with DG FISMA in the implementation of this AML action plan. We also run a private partnership initiative, so-called EFIP, Europol Financial Intelligence Public-Private Partnership, where we reach out to the industry to discuss this type of crime. I would like to underline that the need for fluid and advanced cooperation between all the stakeholders in the entire AML chain, the private sector, the FIUs, law enforcement, policymakers, the supervisory bodies, etc., is of utmost importance. We believe that the new AML and counter-financing of terrorism package demonstrates the level of ambition of the EU in this field, and also it shows that there's a clear political will to improve the system. But at the same time, I would also like to point out, and it is evident, this is a very complex area. And I'm afraid there will not be too many quick wins. So this is a long-term project. You've mentioned, Karel, that we've been having for 3 decades AML policies in place. And we are also always trying to catch up with the new developments that are also fueled by the globalization of the financial services and offering new possibilities, also technological developments like virtual currencies. So we are always at least one step behind and trying to catch up. Cooperation with the FIUs, in particular on the information regarding the suspicious transaction reports, of course, is crucial for law enforcement. Also with other competent authorities like financial investigators in the member states, law enforcement services, or customs administrations. One example is the declarations at the borders of the European Union. And so we try to provide operational support to all these actors. And the right legal framework and functioning channels of cooperation need to be ensured between all the stakeholders. And one difficulty, if I may point it out, is that the prevention, the money laundering directive is based on the internal market, and the law enforcement is dealing under the area of justice, security and freedom. And this is sometimes quite a challenge to get this under one umbrella, because one area cannot impose on the other. The legal framework should reflect the need to include law enforcement as much as possible in the cooperation. We have already communication channels that are well tested, and one is the Siena communication channel. That is the main communication tool used by Europol. We receive contributions via Siena from a couple of FIUs. Not all of them can use the system for various reasons. and those that cannot use the system can exchange information with Europol, hopefully also in the future via the FIU net. So we try to keep that possibility open, so to reach out to all the FIUs. And we welcome them and offer, of course, the entire toolkit that Europol has at our disposition. And we know that the FIU net will not be hosted anymore at Europol as of end of September this year. And we are currently discussing with the Commission the transfer of the FIU net. And I may say there is a good progress, and we are confident that we have a good outcome at the end of September. In conclusion, I agree, it was said already, that we are now at a turning point in the fight against money laundering in the European Union. I truly believe that the different setup in the member states, as mentioned by Ms. Bruna, the varieties of FIUs, that shouldn't be a problem at all. However, it needs to be guaranteed that the ultimate goal is not lost out of sight, and that is to fight crime. So involve law enforcement as much as possible, and we would like to reach a standard whereby once a criminal activity is being investigated in terms of money laundering, and the case is a cross-border case, then this information should be shared with the law enforcement authorities and also with Europol. And let me finish by stating that we know from analysis that about 90% of all the suspicious transaction reports that are filed to the FIUs are cross-border cases. So money laundering is a truly international crime, and this requires a well-functioning cooperation. So thank you for giving me the floor. This was my short intervention of this topic.
Okay, thank you very much. Burkhard, there are certainly some things people want to react upon. If I can see, I mean, there are some questions, and one of the questions is, of course, I mean, this single agency, how it should look like. Will it become the agency for Europe, not only looking at the financial supervisory side, but also at the non-financial supervisory side? I will leave this to Eero and to Raluca probably to comment upon this. But also there is this question which you raised, Burkhard, which I would like Raluca, probably also Eero, to hear their comments upon. Let's say the basis, if you want to institute a single agency, if you do it on a single market basis, or you do it on the, as you said, on a law enforcement rule basis, which I think is a very valid point which you made, Burkhard. I don't know whether Eero wants to react first on these elements which you heard, and then Raluca. And I see there are still questions coming in, so please do.
Thank you, Karel. And as I said, this supervision question and the agency here is an important one. However, it's a question of which kind of approach do you want to do. As I said, in the Parliament, there is a very strong support to the idea that it ought to be a new single agency, and its tasks ought to cover all the aspects, both the financial and non-financial ones. So, but then the other possibility is go more step by step, and then you can think that you are enforcing the capabilities of the structures which we now have. And then in the report, this is proposed by our writers, that step by step could mean that we are starting from enhancing the capabilities of the European Banking Authority. And then, of course, it would mean that then we are talking more about financial sector and not so much on the non-financial sector. I suppose, Karel, you could say something on this question because you have put a lot of time and thoughts to this supervisory question In our report is more the step-by-step, and it's worth mentioning that in the Parliament, people are more waiting a single new agency which ought to have the whole scope of the money laundering in its capabilities and in its duties. Perhaps, Karo, you could say something more about your ideas.
In our report, I personally, let's say, do not think a AML supervisory agency, a big one, will be the solution. I think we should, as Eero was just saying, build on the structure which we have within EBA, and probably over time come to a separate governance structure within EBA, which we have, by the way, within ESMA for the supervision of CCPs. The thing is also that, I mean, I think if you create a single supervisory agency, it raises many issues, like also the issues which Burkhard mentioned. Let's say, what is the legal base? What is the competence of this agency? How will we staff this agency? What will be the budget for this agency? All questions which have to be resolved very rapidly. And I've heard from within the Commission that, for example, already the budgeting and the staffing are extremely important issues. But what I found even more important, if you were to create a single agency, what powers will the single agency have? I mean, if already we see that the non-financial sector is such a problem and about 50% of money laundering happens through the non-financial sector, will this agency manage to supervise the non-financial sector? And as I said, a third thing is that for my part, the real bottleneck is the FIUs. I think my priority would be to strengthen cooperation amongst the FIUs. And as Burkhard was saying, we see, as also Raluca was saying, we see already the structures of these different FIUs is very different. The entity to which they belong, the degree of cooperation with Europol is very different. And if we know that it's happening above all internationally, I think this is where we have to emphasize policy action. I think the supervisory cooperation at the level of financial supervisors already exists within EBA and probably needs to be strengthened with more staff. But I think the real priority will be at the level of the prosecution and making sure we act upon cases of money laundering. But I can ask Raluca to comment upon this as well.
Yes, thank you. First of all, before discussing a bit about the future agency, I would like to reply to the second question because it would facilitate my explanations to the first. So the question was, what is the legal basis to establish this new agency? But it's not about establishing this new agency. The legal basis for all union legislation for in the field of AML CFT as a preventative legislation is, of course, it was so far, this is not to be challenged. It's the internal market legal basis. So it's Article 114 in the treaty. This being said, when we speak about fighting money laundering and enforcement and prosecution and investigation, we do not only speak about this preventative legislation, but also about other pieces of legislation. You may know that apart from today, as we speak, apart from the anti-money laundering 4th and 5th directive, the 5th, which is now in force, we also have a directive with a different legal basis in Title 5 in the treaty, police cooperation on fighting money laundering from a criminal law perspective. So, and this is also a directive which is in force. DG Home is the main service in the Commission working on this, but we work very closely with colleagues in DG Home. Then we have another piece of legislation which is currently in force, which is a directive adopted in 2019, which also on access to financial information and for law enforcement and for FIUs. And there the legal basis is police cooperation, so Title 5 in the treaty. So I would sum up by saying that I would not be worried about the legal basis. I would just say that we have a treaty, we have to follow the treaty. But then what is important is the result at the end of the day. And the result at the end of the day is that with this AML package, which is only addressing the preventative side of the issue, we believe that along with the other instruments that I've mentioned, they may offer a comprehensive legal framework so that, our institutions, the union in general, has strengthened AML CFT defenses. In the action plan that the Commission adopted in May last year, there is a pillar on enforcement. I mean, here I would just flag that cooperation with the European Economic and Financial Crime Center in Europol, which was established last year and is operational. The view of the Commission was that this center, along with the future mechanism for FIUs, they have to be, let's say, natural interlocutors, and they have to together develop solutions to boost and the exchange of information, and particularly in cross-border cases, and effective prosecution for which FIUs would not be responsible. As to the agency, the supervisory structure, as I tried to explain earlier, we have reached the conclusion that the problem lies not only with the financial sector, but also with the non-financial sector. And this is why the intention is to make a proposal so that the supervisor has direct supervisory powers over the financial sector, but not even there. It will not be possible for the EU supervisor, and it would not be effective and proportionate to have the European supervisor exerting from one day to the other supervision of all financial institutions throughout the Union. So even there, the effective exercise of this direct supervisory power will be exerted over a limited number of institutions, financial institutions, based on criteria that will be defined in the regulation. And here we work on, on a path that was worked on before. The SSM functions in the same way. So they basically have a competence to exert supervision, prudential supervision over the entire financial system, but in fact they exert this competence over a limited number of entities.
There was, by the way, a question about this, Raluca. What is the analogy between the SSM and creating an AML agency?
In which way, Carol?
Just, I mean, what is the analogy? I think there is an analogy, but the analogy shouldn't be taken too far, because the big issue for me is at AML level is that the supervision should happen at the local level, because that's where the the money laundering is happening.
Indeed. I mean, again, we all know that unlike for supervision, AML is not about the haystack. AML may be about the needle in the haystack. And we have seen that small financial institutions, small banks were in the past, unfortunately, misused for money laundering purposes, with the effects over the reputation of the entire union financial system. So from this point of view, what we'll table would be, so we'll look at, first of all, at cross-border large entities with the highest risk and defined as the riskiest by the national authorities, but will also provide a possibility for the agency either to call, first of all, to call on national supervisors to look at smaller entities that are very risky, but that they are not necessarily cross-border, to the extent to which there are indications that they're misused for money laundering. So first, the agency, the supervisor, EU supervisor, will call upon national supervisors to exert supervision there. I mean, to focus better on this kind of supervision. And if there is no action from, or if there is a call for the national supervisor to invite the union supervisors to step in, this would be possible. So in this sense, there is an analogy with SSM, but the analogy diverges because, again, we have to take into account the specificities of AML. And just a couple of words on the non-financial sector: lawyers, notaries, real estates, accountants, gambling. I mean, there are a myriad of such obliged entities. In most of the cases, we speak about self-regulatory bodies that are responsible at national level. And here the role, the future role of the European Supervisory Authority would be to have an oversight and leading approach in this respect. So this would not include, not at all. I mean, I want to rule this out from the beginning, not at all have a direct supervisory role, but a forum to facilitate convergence between different practices at member states level, exchange of good practices, peer reviews among public authorities that in some member states, not in all, they exert an oversight over these self-regulatory bodies. I hope that this replies.
Okay, thank you. I mean, there were some further questions, many further questions. Luca, probably, or no, Eero, probably for you. I mean, there are some questions about what to do about the 4th and the 5th directive. You know, I mentioned this in the report. They are not well implemented. And then also, because you're a former Minister of Finance in the Econ Committee, what about this disconnect between tax evasion and money laundering? I mean, sometimes, as you also emphasize in the report, we don't have a single definition in EU law about what is money laundering. And some member states see tax evasion as being an administrative problem. For others, it's criminal. How do you look at this? Say these two things. So implementation of the 4th and the 5th directive, what do we need to do with this? And then the issue of tax evasion.
This is a very good question because, of course, we have the 4th and 5th directive and they ought to be implemented. I'm in favor of, you could say, hard decisions here in favor of the Commission to take those member states who are not fulfilling their duties to the court. And we know that already now there are, if I remember right, there are 3 member states who Commission has started a procedure against them in the Court of European Union, and then there are member states who have been notified that they are not doing their job according to their duties, and this means that without waiting the new structures, and it will take some time to make the new regulation, we have to be sure that there is pressure towards those member states who have not done their duties. So in the Parliament there is great support for the Commission to be quite hard here, and I hope that the Commission will do its work to make sure that the 4th and 5th directives are implemented.
And then on the tax evasion issue, I mean, on this, whatever, how do we define money laundering?
This is also a good question, and I'm more in favor of the angle that tax evasion is criminal, and it ought to be tackled in the criminal law, and be very hard here. And this is more and more important discussion because we know that member states are short of money, and then at the same time there are huge problems both in the large money laundering area and then also in tax evasion. So if it would be criminal, it would mean that the member states have the responsibilities here. And then concerning the exchange of information on tax issues, that's something where we can still do a lot of together. And I hope that the Council is ready to go further on this exchange of information practices. And the Commission is preparing the proposals for the Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We know that this is a big issue in the European Parliament, and we hope, let's say, also to present a report for the Fisc Committee of the European Parliament, which looks at tax evasion and tax harmonization. But I have a question for Burkhard. There is also a specific question from John Cusack, who's the chair of Global Coalition to Fight Financial Crime. He's wondering whether there's sufficient effectiveness in, in following up or, procedures of complying with all the rules which we have at the level of enforcement. So are you, I mean, how do you score internally? Do you apply, for example, balanced scorecards in assessing compliance and being effective with, or say on the way on an international level, with all the different things you will have to investigate at European level? Is there sufficient cooperation between all these different levels, which I try to explain in this one chart, between supervisors, law enforcement, enforcement entities, regulated entities at European level, and how can we improve this? I mean, we also have advocated a report that's basically coming from Richard, that we need to have performance indicators. Can we do this? Do you work with this at a European level?
Yeah, and enforcement faces many challenges in investigating money laundering offenses. First, dealing with the STRs, we know that obliged entities are not happy with the feedback they receive on the outcomes. There has been a lot of investment in the past years to improve this, which is not an easy task at all. Some of the problems maybe are related to the staffing at FIUs, which seems to be sometimes an issue, coping with the overall workload. We have, of course, we see that the FIUs, they have performance indicators, and law enforcement have them as well. And at Europol, of course, we try to follow also clear objectives measured by performance indicators. But the problem is a money laundering investigation is quite a lengthy undertaking. As I mentioned before, it immediately leads you to other jurisdictions within the European Union. That works rather well, I would say. But often, very often, there are third countries involved. Also countries, of course, chosen by criminal organizations where they know that the cooperation is not working that well. So countries where it's easier to hide the criminal profits. Then you need to enter in MLA requests being sent to those countries with an uncertain outcome. So those investigations, they can take quite a long time, sometimes a couple of years. And then you have to balance where do you invest in an investigation that has a very uncertain outcome, which may take you many years, or in other cases that are more promising. So you have to prioritize. And that, of course, includes all the levels. Also, the judiciary is a very important player in this part, of course. Finally, the orders are given by the prosecutor, by the magistrates, asking for MLA, for seizures, and so on. So we work towards the courts and depend on their engagement as well, which is working. But the number of cases, the sheer number of cases, is a serious issue.
Thank you, Burkhard. We should almost stop, but if I could ask Raluca a final question. I don't know, Eero, I know we have to have another meeting at 11:30, but there was a question, let's say, whether the EPO can play an important role, but then also the link to the rule of law, a European-wide rule of law. But also, I mean, a different question, which is, which I also advocate, the use of public-private partnerships, which also Burkhard referred, let's say, that they at the Europol level are trying to do this cooperation between the private and public sector. But how can you kind of enshrine this in European law, Raluca? So probably the issue about public-private partnership is cooperation, and then the issue probably that you could still address EPO is, can EPO play a role? And then I think we'll have to finish our webinar.
Thank you, Carol. Indeed, the PPPs, the public-private partnerships, we have heard from interlocutors that, from stakeholders, that they're an important tool for effective enforcement, and we cannot agree more. And this is why the Commission, in its action plan, in this pillar on enforcement, the Commission recognized the role of PPPs, recognized that they should be encouraged to the extent possible, And we have announced, the Commission has announced that later on this year, we'll publish guidelines on PPPs, because not all PPPs are the same. They can take various forms, and without entering into the details, we will publish guidelines. But this is a call that we have well heard, and the intention is not to turn a blind eye on this, but to deliver. But it will not be in the AML legislative package, but as a guidance later on this year.
And then on the role of EPO, and then somebody asked, could we have a European investigation order?
Well, here I would be happy to pass on the questions to my colleagues in DG Justice and on EPPO. I have my views, but I'm not competent to discuss about EPPO, and the same is for the European investigation order. But I will pass on the questions to colleagues in DG Just, and will, if possible, through you, get back to our interlocutor.
Thank you, Raluca. Any final comments from Burkhard on that issue of the role of EPO?
Yes, actually, I'm happy to announce that we have just concluded a working arrangement with EPO that went into force the 19th of January. And we will closely cooperate with EPO and support them in their investigations. And they will be, of course, also responsible for investigating money laundering within their mandate, within the mandate to protect the financial interests of the European Union. And we are looking forward to supporting them in this endeavor.
Very good. Eero, final comment before you rush to your other meeting?
So thank you, Karel, and thank you also for our panelists' very valuable comments here. Concerning EPO, its role is important, and my personal opinion is that its role will be much stronger in the future. But as we all know, it's a very sensitive issue, and there are a lot of very basic attitudes concerning and ideas concerning the role of European Union and the relations between European Union and member states when we are talking about the role of EPO. But personally, I think that its role must be strengthened in the future, and how to do, I'm waiting the proposals of experts. But many thanks for all of you to be present here. Many thanks once more for our panelists. And this is a moment of change and perhaps moment of hope also concerning the anti-money laundering activities. And I'm pretty confident that this proposal which we have made today is useful for the discussion and also useful for the Commission when it's preparing its proposals for Council and Parliament. Thank you indeed.
Thank you very much, Eero, and thank you, Raluca and Burkhard, for joining me. But also let me thank Richard Parlour, who was my co-author, who we couldn't bring up for time reasons, let's say, in this discussion, but he's working as a lawyer on crime cases and who has, above all, the link with crime, as also Burkhard mentioned, let's say, is extremely important, but also emphasize, for example, this role for public-private partnerships, this cooperation which came on in the debate. As I said, the report is available on our website. You can download it. You will also have this chart if you want to use it. I will try to publish some shorter pieces about this because we certainly as SEPs want to advance the debate upon this matter, because we believe it's very important to act upon this, certainly as a European Union, but also in the international context. So thanks for listening in. We were about 160 at some stage, so there is a lot of interest in this matter. And please share your further thoughts. We couldn't respond to all the questions, but there's certainly a lot of interest in this matter. Thanks a lot. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Burkhard and
Bye-bye.
Eero.
Have a nice
Bye-bye.
day.
Thank you, Raluca.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Beatrice.